Good morning. Welcome to LifeSpring. If you're new here, my name is Dylan. I'm one of the pastors on staff. Super excited that you've joined us. I especially want to welcome those of you who maybe it's your first time ever in church. Maybe it's your first time back in church in a long time. We're thrilled you're with us today. Several things before we get going. First off, my mother-in-law is here today, and it's her birthday. So on the count of three, say, happy birthday, Miss McDaniel. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Miss McDaniel. Awesome, fantastic. Second, if you're new here, maybe you saw the pictures in the lobby, some artistic renderings. That's our future new home. We're actually in the process now of moving from being a portable church, which we've been in this room for about 2 years, to being a permanent church. And last week we kicked off a capital campaign designed to raise the funding to move us into our new facility. We need $65,000. You guys at LifeSpring have already committed over $40,000 to that, which is awesome. Thank you. Yes, we can clap for that. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I really do believe God always provides. God provides through faithful people. So for those of you who gave or who have pledged amounts, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's awesome to see. So today we're starting a brand new series called, one more thing on that. We have our first church-wide work day coming up this coming Saturday at our future home. So if you want to sign up for that, especially if you have like a pressure washer or that sort of thing, or a battery-powered screwdriver, we need your services on Labor Day Saturday. If you're in town, you can sign up at Next Steps. If you have questions, run down Pastor Mark, tackle him. He would love to get you over there with me and him, diving neck deep into insulation. It'll be awesome. It'll be awesome. So, if you want to follow along today, we're going to be in Luke chapter, you think I remember it, chapter 12. Luke chapter 12 is where we'll be. If you don't have a Bible, everything will be on screen. And if you don't have a Bible because you don't own one, drop by Next Steps on the way out. They will give you a Bible for free. And when we say free, like we really do mean free. Not free 99, but free. So today we're starting a brand new series called Unstuck, and over the next 8 weeks, I really do believe it will be the single most helpful teaching series we've ever done as a church. Next week, Pastor Mark will be up here, and he'll be talking about how you can get unstuck in your parenting. We all know all of y'all are perfect parents and have no issues, but we've decided to do that anyway. Week 3, the Sunday after Labor Day, we'll be talking about how to get unstuck in your marriage. Week 4, we'll talk about how to get unstuck in your finances. Week 5, we'll talk about how to get unstuck in your career. Week 6, 7, and 8, we'll talk about how to get unstuck from your habits. Week 7, how to get unstuck from your past. Then week 8, the week that every single person will want to be here, is how to get unstuck in your singleness, or perhaps how to find a date. Today, we're starting, all the single people laugh. They're like, I want to be at that. You should. It'll be fun. But today we're going to talk about, as we kick this series off, how to get unstuck in your purpose, how to get unstuck in what we live for, who we live for, and how to live a life that ultimately matters. I'll start it off with a story. I have a twin brother. He's a lawyer here in Smithfield. So if you ever see me and you're like, hey, Pastor Dylan, and I don't respond, then you've run across my brother. So this is a picture of us. He's obviously the better looking of the two of us, obviously. But there's a lot of different, by the way, out of curiosity, anybody else a twin in here? Anybody? Anybody? One person who's a twin. Great. That's cool. Twins are awesome. You're now my favorite person, with the exception of my wife. My wife's my favorite. So, but when you're a twin, there's lots of different perks that come from being a twin. You have a built-in playmate, which is awesome. You have a built-in scapegoat, which is even more awesome. If something happens, it's like, he did it, or she did it if you have a sister who's a twin. There's also some maybe not so great things about having a twin. It means typically if one of you gets in trouble, the other one also gets in trouble. You have a built-in troublemaker, so usually we get in trouble together. That's kind of a negative. One of the other benefits about being a twin, though, is you learn how to share. Because as a twin, you share everything. I mean, it starts off from before you're born, you share everything. Pretty much. So you're born, you share probably a crib, you share a bedroom, you share a bathroom, you share socks, you share underwear when you're a twin, which I know some of y'all are like, that's gross, but hey, it goes in the washing machine, it comes out clean, it all goes in the same drawer, you just kind of use it. But does anybody else find that gross that's not a twin? If you do, it's fine, I don't judge you. I mean, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's kind of the way I think about it. But there was one thing in particular that my brother and I would not share ever. It didn't matter how much you tried to force us to, we would not share, and that is shirts. Which is weird. It's like you share underwear, but you wouldn't share T-shirts. No, we would not share T-shirts. And so this is typically how this scenario played out. One of us would grab a T-shirt and put it on, and it was typically the other one's T-shirt. Now, sometimes the other twin had not worn this shirt for literally years. Like that is not a joke. But as soon as one of us saw what we thought was our shirt on the other one, immediately tempers fly, and it would go something like this. Hey, take that off. That's mine. And the other twin would obviously listen to reason, right? No, not at all. It would be like, no, usually it's like, well, even if this is yours, you never wear it. You haven't worn this shirt in 2 years. And the argument would continue. It's like, no, it's mine. Take it off. Give it to me. And when inevitably the one twin didn't listen to the other, the dispute would go before the Supreme Court of the house, otherwise known as Mom. So we would go to Mom, and the prosecutor would say, Mom, he's got my shirt on. Tell him to take it off and give it back because that shirt is mine. And I honestly can't tell you how those disputes really ended, but as I think about how often that happened and how me or my brother would say, hey, that's mine, in so many ways, that one word tends to sum up the default purpose of our life. In fact, you can write this down if you're taking notes. My purpose defined, mine. My purpose defined, mine. Mine is who I tend to live for. I want mine. I'm going to work to get what's mine. Give me mine. Mine, mine, mine. It sounds like the Nemo seagulls. Mine, 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 mine. But is that not true? Typically, in fact, don't answer out loud, but think in your head, who do you typically live for? Mine. We typically live for us. In our default setting from the moment we're born. I mean, look at your cute little babies when they're born. They want mine. They don't want yours. They don't want God's. They want mine. And mine can typically be divided into 3 different categories. These are very, very broad, but these tend to be the categories we tend to live for. This will not be on the screen, but you can write this down. The first category of mine would be security. And security would include things like retirement accounts or bank accounts, or maybe you build a house and you try to make it as fireproof as possible, which is smart, but it's still this security thing. Maybe security looks like for you, you're an apocalyptic junkie, and the purpose of your life is building a bunker and having enough arms and canned beans so that you can survive either a nuclear holocaust or a zombie takeover. You're obsessed with security. I want to be safe. In a lot of ways, this goes back to control. I want to make sure that I'm taken care of. This is why you buy a Ford, not because it's an awesome vehicle, but because it's built like a tank. You know, you're not going to get hurt in a Ford, most likely. But security is kind of the first mine. The second mine would be stuff. You want stuff. You want a car or cars, a house or houses. Maybe it's just cash. Maybe if you're a teenager, I don't even remember what teenagers want anymore. Typically food, and maybe that's it. You want maybe experiences like vacations, but you want stuff. I want my stuff. The third category of mine is typically kind of difficult to see as a negative, but we'll show you how it is later, but it tends to be survival. My survival. Like maybe you're here and you're like, well, I'm just living paycheck to paycheck, or I'm on welfare, or I'm unemployed. I'm not even sure how I'm going to make it to tomorrow. I just want to survive. For you, life is about my survival. And those categories, security, stuff, survival, they're very, very broad. And so a lot of times it won't work out that you're only into one of those things. Typically it's going to be a combination of those things. But here's the problem with that. When we live for mine, when life is about what I want, what I desire, it is going to do 2 things that are very, very negative. First off, it's going to warp my view of other people. In fact, watch this. Luke chapter 12, verse 13. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." So here's what happens with this guy. Apparently, he thinks he's owed more inheritance than his brother is. And his brother's like, no, you're not getting that. So now this guy goes to Jesus and he's like, hey, Jesus, tell my brother to give me mine. I deserve that. I'm entitled to it. Tell him to give it to me. Notice what's happened here. He's no longer approaching his brother as a brother and a loved family member. His brother's now the opposition. And when you and I live for mine, whether it's stuff, security, survival, or a combination of the three, the very first thing it does, it warps our view of other people and it makes other people the enemy. And here's why it's going to do that. Because just like you live for mine, other people live for mine. And when your mine and their mine clash, you get conflict. And let's be honest, most of the time, we don't want the same thing somebody else wants. Typically, we want the opposite. And so when mine is front and center in my life, people become the enemy. I no longer want to be close to people. I want to fight against people. Let's be honest, this is why as a parent you'll have tension with teenagers. This is why you'll have tension in your marriage. This is why your finances tend to fall apart. This is why we struggle with addiction because, well, I want mine. And it warps our life and it warps the way we view other people because we often see other people as standing in the way of mine. And if mine is front and center, I'm going to step over other people to get mine. But it does something else too that is subtle in this passage, but it shows up. It warps our view of Jesus. Like, notice here, this guy doesn't come to Jesus saying, Jesus, teach me how to follow you. Jesus, teach me what it means to have eternal life. Jesus, teach me how to be a good husband or a good dad or just a good man. He's like, Jesus, help me get mine. And if we're not careful, that's the way we'll approach Jesus. Not as God, not as Lord, but hey, Jesus, you're a genie or you're Santa Claus and you exist to help me get mine. Let's be honest. That's why some of y'all are at church today. That's why some of y'all look at see the content we have for this upcoming series and you're like, oh, marriage, parenting, finances, career. Like I like that. Jesus can help me get mine. But Jesus doesn't exist for that. In fact, watch how Jesus replies in verse 14. Jesus replied, man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you? In other words, dude, I didn't show up to settle your inheritance dispute. I didn't show up to help you get yours. I didn't show up to give you this luxurious life where you get everything you could ever want. God is not Santa Claus. God is not a genie that we rub the bottle 3 times and say, bless the Lord, all my soul, and give me everything I want, and then you get everything you want. He came for more than that. And yes, Jesus does want to change your life, but He doesn't exist for you to get yours. He doesn't exist for me to get mine. And in this very next verse, He actually speaks directly against mine. Verse 15, then He said to them, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. In other words, what we tend to think life is about is not what life is about. We tend to think life is about mine, but Jesus is saying life is not about you getting yours. Life doesn't consist in an abundance of mine. And then He's going to share a story called a parable, which is just simply a story that has a spiritual meaning to illustrate what happens when we live for mine. Watch this. Verse 16, He told him this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Notice in these few verses how often the word I and my come up. So the point Jesus is making here is this guy's living for mine. His crops, his grain, his life, he lives for mine. And in a lot of ways, here's where it gets tense for us. This guy looks like he's got the life that we would love to have. Because let's be honest, how many of y'all would love to have so much stuff that you're like, I got to build a bigger house to keep all my stuff? How many of y'all would like that? Be honest. Be honest. Come on. Come on. Y'all are not telling the truth. Be honest this morning. Let me put it another way. How many of y'all would like to have so much money that you got to build an underground bunker to store your billions? How many of y'all would like that? Be honest. Thank you. Thank you. We would love to have this problem. To have so much of mine that I have to build more to have mine. Sounds like a great life to us. Let's be honest, this get really, really tense. Doesn't it kind of sound like the fulfillment of the American dream? Now, cards on the table. I love America. I really do. It's got problems, sure, but I think this is the freest nation on earth. You have more opportunity here than anywhere in the world. And the pursuit of happiness is a great thing, but if the American dream is the pinnacle of your existence, you're missing the point. Because the American dream tends to center on mine. And there's a few problems with this that we're going to find out, but one thing that hit me this week as I was listening to another guy preach, and he was talking about a passage in Isaiah which a lot of scholars believe describes the fall of Satan from heaven. You know what Satan tends to say a lot of? I will do blank. I'll get mine. So when my attitude toward life is I'm getting mine, did you know that attitude mirrors that of the devil? Because it's no longer, God, what do you want? It's, I want. It's about me. It's about mine. And if you make life about yours, if you make life about mine, if I make life about mine, here's the really tricky thing. You'll probably get it. You'll probably get yours. Y'all are smart people. Y'all are hard workers, all that sort of stuff. You will probably get exactly what you work for. But then watch what Jesus comes back and says, verse 20. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? Now, let me make a couple things clear here. First off, God is not saying to this dude, oh, you're rich, I'm going to get you. There's nothing wrong with money. And I know somebody's going to say, well, the Bible says money is the root of all evil. No, it says money is a root of all kinds of evil, not the root. Nothing wrong with money. Nothing wrong with being rich. He's not even looking at this guy and saying, man, you misspoke. I got to get my lightning bolts and bang, I got to take you out. It's not what God is saying. What God is saying is this. You've made your life all about getting your stuff. You've made life all about mine. And you've missed the point. You've missed the fact that eventually you're going to die. And in fact, in this story, God would tell this man, in just a few hours, you're going to die. And then all this stuff you've spent your life trying to get, it's going to be pointless. Because you can't take it with you into eternity. And it's not going to matter a hill of beans in eternity for you. And then what? Who's going to get what you've prepared for yourself? In the one sense, the guy wouldn't get any of his stuff. But in the second sense, the man would receive exactly what he prepared for himself. And here's how. He wanted nothing to do with God in this life. He would get none of God in the next. Guys, this is going to come up a little more this morning. But please do not make the eternal error of assuming I prayed a prayer. I got my fire insurance. I'm not going to hell. And then thinking that you can make life all about you. Because that does not describe salvation. Jesus is not in the fire insurance business. And in Southern Bible Belt Christianity, we have this problem where we think I go to church, I read my Bible, I prayed a prayer, and we think that somehow gives us a pass to, okay, I got my Jesus, now I can do whatever I want. No. No. To follow Jesus means you follow Jesus, not follow mine. And when you live for mine to the neglect of God, you get nothing in eternity. And ultimately, your life in the here and now is wasted. Jesus sums it up like this, verse 21. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich towards God. In other words, if you live for mine, if I live for mine, guess what we just did? We wasted our life. Now, poll, how many of y'all would love to waste your life? Nobody? Really? Of course not. None of us, not a single one of us woke up this morning and said, you know what, my alarm went off. I want to blow it today. I want my life to count for nothing. I want to go and throw everything away. I want to live a pointless life. I want my tombstone to say, he came, he saw, he failed, he wasted his life. None of us want that. None of us want to live a pointless life. We want to live a life of meaning, a life of significance. We want a life that is thriving and that's healthy and that matters. And guess what? Jesus wants the exact same thing for you. In some sense, you and Jesus want exactly the same thing to a degree, in that we want a life that matters. Jesus wants you to live a life that matters. But as we just saw, it's not going to happen when we live for mine, because if I live for mine, that's the way to a wasted life. And so Jesus is going to deconstruct all of this mind that we've built up. And then he's going to redefine our purpose in one glorious statement. But first, he's going to tear down our security, our stuff, and our survival. He starts off with our security. Jesus said to his disciples, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. Now, that doesn't compute with us. Because do we not spend most of life worrying, how are the bills going to get paid? What am I going to eat? What am I going to wear? We worry a lot. And yet Jesus just said, don't worry about it. Don't obsess over your security. And that confuses us, because from the time we're like, yay, hi, we're taught to obsess over security. We're taught, don't talk to strangers. Don't get in the car with a stranger. And yet now somehow Uber is okay. Explain that to me, please. I'm not down with Uber, y'all. I'm not getting in the car with you if you're a stranger. No, it's just not happening. No. We're taught, don't play with matches. And if you get lit on fire, stop, drop, and roll. We're taught from the time we're kids, be safe, be secure. And yet here comes Jesus and he's like, don't worry about your security. Don't obsess over your security. Don't obsess over making life perfectly safe for you. And here's why. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Life is more than just about making sure I'm safe. And then he says this, consider the ravens. Now, ravens in the Jewish culture in which Jesus was speaking to, they were considered completely worthless. Completely worthless. They had no value at all. And yet he says here, they do not sow or reap. They don't have storerooms or barns. They don't have bank accounts or retirement accounts. They don't even have Social Security or Medicaid. I added that last part in there. Yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable are you than the birds? What he's saying is this. Man, if God takes care of what you consider to be worthless birds, then they don't have any of this stuff that we obsess over to make themselves secure. How much more do you think God is going to take care of you as a person that He created in His image? Because Jesus just said, man, you're worth so much more than the ravens. In other words, God can take care of it. And then he makes another point. He says, who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? And in so many ways, That encapsulates the issue we have when we obsess over my security, and here's how. We worry about how to make our life safe because we got control issues. We worry about how to prolong our life because we got control issues. We want to be in control, and we think somehow that if we work really, really, really hard, we can make ourselves secure and we can make ourselves in control. But are you really in control? For example, who got you here safely this morning? Somebody said, God, great. It ruins my joke. But I'm going to go with it anyway. Thank you for the Sunday school answer. That's awesome. Here's what we would tend to think if I asked you, if you weren't in church and I said, who drove you safely to church? You'd be like, me. Especially if you're a dude, you'd be like, well, I'm the safest driver in the whole world. I have perfect driving, which no doubt you do. And I pray to God you don't teach your kids to drive because you drive scary. But think about that. And you may be the safest driver. Perhaps you are. But did you really get yourself here safely? Or did you have to depend on all the other morons on the road to not do something incredibly stupid? Let's be honest. You can have Geico, you can have Allstate, you can be technically completely protected from mayhem and all that sort of stuff. And you can have a perfect driving record. You can drive like your beloved grandmother and drive 5 miles or 10 miles under the speed limit. And if you're a grandmother this morning, thank you for being a safe driver. You make the world a better place. Thank you. Teenagers should learn from you, in my opinion. You can drive so safe. You can never tailgate. You can always use your turn signal, which you should, by the way. You should. You can even stop completely at the stop signs instead of rolling through it, which you shouldn't. And if you do, I hope a police officer comes up behind you and gives you a ticket so you learn your lesson. You could do all this stuff, and guess what? Some moron texting could swerve out of their lane, and bang, you're gone. So are we really in control? No, not in control. You didn't really get yourself here. God made sure you got here. And worrying and stressing is not going to do a single thing to really make you in control. And so Jesus says, since you can't do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? You're not in control. You can't really make yourself safe. So stop obsessing over your security. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't make wise decisions. It doesn't mean you shouldn't save or invest or have good insurance or safe vehicles or wear your seatbelt and that sort of thing. What Jesus is saying is, yes, be wise, but don't obsess over being safe, because at the end of the day, you're not in control. God is. You're not the one who makes yourself secure. God is the one who makes yourself secure. We do get spiders in here from time to time, being portable. But it only happens about once every 8 months, so you're probably good. We'll be out of here in 8 months anyway. See, you couldn't even control that. Case in point. Don't obsess over your security. Don't obsess over your security, because at the end of the day, you will never be in control. Only God will be in control. Then Jesus turns to our stuff, which we love stuff. We do. By the way, I have a birthday in a few weeks. I don't want toys, but I would like gift cards. To a restaurant, preferably. And I will not say the restaurant's name because my wife told me not to. But all of y'all know who it is anyway. So, anyway, Jesus turns to our stuff. And he says this, consider how the wild flowers grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. This is what Jesus is saying. Solomon was one of the wealthiest and the second wisest man to ever live besides Jesus. He could have bought anything he wanted for his palace to clothe himself. And yet what Jesus is saying is this. Man, look at the lilies of a field. Or if he was talking to me, he probably would have said, look at a freshly cut lawn that's got stripes in it. It looks like a checkerboard. And maybe that doesn't impress you, but I think Jesus would say, man, look at a sunset. Look at the mountains. Look at the ocean. And is there Even Solomon, with all his wealth, he couldn't buy himself anything as impressive as a field full of wildflowers. You and I, no matter how much we have, no matter how much stuff we accumulate, we can't ever accumulate anything that is nearly as impressive as what God has already done. Which is really, really crazy because, watch what he says this. If this is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire after it's cut, how much more will He clothe you? You have little faith. What he's saying is this. He's not saying that your stuff is thoroughly unimportant, although in the ultimate scheme of things it is. What he's saying is, why are you so impressed with something so temporary when you can look at what God's already done? And there's nothing you can accumulate that compares to what God's done. Like maybe you build a business. Awesome. God built a universe. Maybe you can paint or design something. God painted a sunset. Maybe you are the smartest person in the history of the universe besides Jesus. And you don't even know what sits down there like 27,000 feet under the ocean's top in the Mariana Trench. The bottom line is, all the stuff we obsess over, none of it compares to what God's already done. And to paraphrase C.S. Lewis, when we obsess over stuff, when we make our life about accumulating stuff, we are settling for playing in a puddle of mud when God has called you to swim in the ocean. So don't obsess over stuff because God's already given us so much more and we have nothing that we can build or create or accumulate that compares to it. Then Jesus goes after our survival. He says this, do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it, for the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. In other words, don't obsess over, where's my next meal going to come from? Am I going to have shelter? Am I going to have enough to pay the bills? Jesus is saying, don't worry about it. Don't obsess over your security. Don't obsess over your survival. Because here's why. If your goal in life is, I'm just trying to make it to Friday. I'm trying to make it through Monday. I'm just trying to survive and make it to the next day. I'm trying to make it to retirement. Guess what is going to happen to your glorious life? It will end. You will die. So it does beg the question, if all of us are going to die, and 1 out of 1 people die, scientific fact, I worked really hard on studying that this week, and I have came to the conclusion, based on studies from Harvard and Yale and Oxford and Cambridge, that 1 out of 1 people do in fact die. So why do we obsess with putting off death? We're going to die anyway. It's like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. We're going down. So why do we obsess over our survival? Jesus is saying, don't obsess over your survival. Because guess what? God knows exactly what you need to survive. God knows exactly what you need before you even ask. And the primary thing God knows that you need is not a life that is filled with mine. Because a life that is lived for my stuff and my security and my survival is a wasted life. And then He redefines our purpose in a beautiful, glorious statement. Verse 31, it says this. But, by the way, God has big butts and He does not lie. You look throughout the Bible, but God. It's true. Some of y'all don't have a sense of humor. You can laugh at that. It's okay. But seek His kingdom, or God's kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. So here's how our purpose is redefined. My purpose defined was mine. My purpose redefined is His. I no longer live for mine. I live for His. I live for God. I live for His kingdom. I live for His mission. Now, before I go further, please do not read this verse this way. If I live for God's kingdom, He'll give me the Ferrari I always wanted. He'll give me a beach house. He'll give me the lottery. That is not what this verse means. Please don't read it that way. I know really bad TV preachers read it that way, and that's just wrong. You shouldn't read it that way. What it means is this. If you stop living for yourself, you start living for God, God will take care of every single thing that you need. And He'll actually change your heart to change the things that you want to where you'll actually want the same things He wants. And what He wants has eternal importance. And so the way to live a life that has eternal significance is I stop living for mine and I start living for His. Now, that's a little frightening, to be honest, for many of us. Because we like to live for mine because we like to be in control of our life. We like to call the shots. But what Jesus is saying is, no. If you want to live a life of eternal significance, you can't call the shots anymore. God's got to call the shots. And in order for God to call the shots, you got to follow Jesus, which the disciples and the people listening to Jesus knew. That meant you leave everything else behind. 2,000 years later, if you follow Jesus, guess what it means? You leave everything else behind. You surrender everything. It's uncomfortable. Because we like mine. And we've got this little nagging voice in the back of our head that's like, I'm not so sure that Jesus can take care of me. Jesus addresses that, verse 32. He says, do not be afraid, little flock. Now, why do you think Jesus would say, don't be afraid? Because you have a reason to be afraid. Like, if I have a little stuffed Winnie the Pooh up here, I'm not going to be like, now, y'all don't be afraid of this little guy. Which, by the way, anybody seen Christopher Robin yet? It's an awesome movie. Here's the thing I struggle with. I'm hearing the guy say Pooh, and I think he should be saying Anakin, because it's the same actor that played Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's just what I think. If you don't get that, that's okay. Your life is probably better off for it. But if I've got a big live grizzly bear in here, then it makes a lot more sense to be like, now y'all don't be scared. He's trained. I know he looks frightening, but he's trained. So Jesus is saying, don't be afraid, because He understands to completely take my hands off of control of my life and give it to God, that's frightening. But then watch what He says to reassure us. He says, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. He didn't say your Father has been pleased to make you work for the kingdom or earn the kingdom. He says, no. If you give your life to Christ, if you make your life about His, guess what? The Father gives you the kingdom. He gives you access to the King. He gives you a relationship to the King. He gives it to you. It's not based on your effort. It's not based on your pedigree. It's not based on your reading the Bible or going to church or living a moral life. It is simply based on you turning and saying, I'm not living for mine anymore. I'm living for Jesus. And when you live for Jesus, He gives you the kingdom. He gives you Himself. He gives you the King's resources. He gives you literally everything you could even want and beyond, because you don't even understand what you want right now. But He's pleased to give that to you. And when you're given the kingdom, watch how it changes the way we live. Watch this. Verse 33, sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. In other words, when your life is lived for the King, He gives you the kingdom so that you can give your life for the kingdom. In fact, you can write this down. I find my life in giving my life away. I don't find my life in living for mine. I find my life in living for His, and then He gives me the kingdom, and then in response, I live and leverage my life for the King. I leverage my life for the King by leveraging my resources, my relationships, my time, all in an effort to advance the kingdom of the King. Because God's kingdom, not mine, is the one that has eternal importance. And so if I want to live a life that has ultimate meaning and ultimate value, I'm going to leverage my life for the King and His kingdom, which means I'm going to run as hard after Jesus as I possibly can. And I'm also going to do whatever it takes to help other people meet Him. Because there are only two things you and I will take to eternity. Not our retirement accounts, not our home, not our cars, not our stuff, not our toys. The only two things that will go from this life into eternity are your relationship with Jesus and the people you introduce Him to. That's what He calls us to live for. Not mine, His. And in calling us to live for His, He's inviting us to treasure what matters the most. And this is what He says, verse 34, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So at the end of the day, who we live for, it's a question of, man, who or what do I actually treasure most? Do I really treasure Jesus most? Or do I treasure me most? Do I treasure God's kingdom most? Or do I treasure my kingdom most? Because to follow Jesus means your heart will be changed by Jesus. And if your heart is being changed by Jesus, then Jesus will become your treasure. Jesus is not simply a ticket out of hell. He's supposed to be our treasure. We're supposed to live for His. And if we live for His, then we leverage our life for His kingdom. So who are you living for this morning? Are you really, truly living for Jesus and His kingdom? Or are you living for you? Because at the end of the day, if I could look at you and say, honestly, I'm living for me, if you could look at me honestly and say, I live for me, guess what? There's a great chance you're not actually following Jesus. Sure, you might have prayed a prayer. You might have been in church from the time you were 2 years old. But man, to have a heart changed by Jesus means I live for Jesus. And I live for His kingdom. And I leverage my life for His kingdom because He has eternal value. And I don't get the kingdom by earning it or working for it. I step into the kingdom by simply receiving what Jesus already purchased for me with His death on the cross and His resurrection. Jesus did not die simply so we could get out of hell. Although that's a nice benefit for sure. He died so we could live for Him and leverage our life for His kingdom. Because He did not die so we could live a purposeless, wasted life. He died so that we could know Him and live a life that will matter all the way into eternity. And the only way we get to that life is we stop living for mine, we start living for His, and we start living for His by giving Him